Welcome to Jolene's Stories, where a woman who gave everything finally reclaims it.
My name is Georgia Manning. I'm 60 years old, and on a Tuesday morning in February, I sat in the parking lot of a Fifth Third bank in Dayton, Ohio, holding a flat carpenter's pencil between my thumb and finger, the way a person holds the last warm thing in a cold room. The pencil belonged to my husband Raymond. He had been dead 9 years. I had just come from a meeting where a man in a gray suit slid a folder across a desk and told me, very gently, that my only son had sold my husband's woodworking workshop to a commercial developer for $285,000 while I was lying in his guest room with pneumonia, breathing into a humidifier he'd bought at a dollar store because, in his words, the hospital units were a ripoff. The pencil in my hand still had sawdust in the grooves. Raymond's sawdust, 9 years old. And I thought, how does a son sell the smell of his father? Before I tell you what came next, and there is more, so much more than the sale of a building, I want to say something to you, whoever you are, listening to me from your kitchen or your car or your porch at the end of a long day. Welcome. This channel exists for people who have been quietly betrayed by the people who were supposed to love them. If that is you, even a little, hit that subscribe button and stay with me. Drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from. I read everyone, and it matters to me that you're here. The story I'm about to tell you is not one I tell easily. It involves my son. It involves my husband, who has been gone almost a decade and somehow still managed to save me from the wreckage. And it involves a pencil. To understand how I ended up in that parking lot, you have to go back to the bungalow on Linwood Avenue, the one Raymond and I paid off in 2009, the one that still has his initials carved into the back of the kitchen doorframe where the wood was soft enough to mark. Raymond and I were married for 34 years before the pancreatic cancer found him. We had one child, Derek, born in 1987, and Raymond built that boy a cradle before he was born. Oak, with little hand-cut moons along the headboard, because I told Raymond once that I dreamed of the moon when I was pregnant, and Raymond was the kind of man who heard a sentence like that and turned it into furniture. He worked for the city water department by day and in his workshop by night. The workshop sat behind our bungalow on a quarter-acre lot Raymond's father had given us when we got married. Cinder block walls, a metal roof, a single hanging bulb over the lathe, a long wooden bench scarred with 30 years of cuts and burns and pencil marks. Raymond made rocking chairs for new babies on our block. He made a dining table for the Hendersons after their house fire. He made a cedar chest for Phyllis the first time she got divorced, and another one when she got divorced again, and Phyllis laughed and said, "Raymond, you're going to run out of cedar before I run out of husbands." Raymond worked in that shop until 8 weeks before he died. The day he could no longer stand up, he asked me to bring him his apron so he could hold it. I brought it. He folded it across his lap like a blanket. The carpenter's pencil was in the front pocket, flat and yellow, sharpened to a wedge with a utility knife the way carpenters do. He died on a Tuesday in March, in hospice care at Miami Valley Hospital. I slept in the recliner beside his bed for 31 consecutive nights. The nurses brought me crackers and apple juice. I did not go home to shower for the first 19 days. I held his hand when he stopped knowing my name, and I held it when he remembered it again at 3 in the morning and said, "Georgia, did I leave the shop light on?" I said, "No, Ray. I turned it off." He said, "Good." He said, "I love you." I said, "I love you." He said it again. He said it about 100 times in those 31 nights, in different voices, in his hospital voice, and his work voice, and the voice he used to use when he was teaching Derek how to sand with the grain. He died holding my hand. I did not let go until the nurse came in and gently moved my fingers. In his apron pocket, when I finally went home and unhooked it from the workshop wall, was the carpenter's pencil. I put it in my purse. I have carried it every day for 9 years. Derek was 28 when his father died. He cried at the funeral. He gave a eulogy about Raymond's hands. He stayed with me for 2 weeks afterward, sleeping on the couch, making me eat soup. He was, in those weeks, the son Raymond and I had raised. I want you to remember that. There was a version of Derek who was good. I keep that version in a separate room in my heart, and I visit it sometimes. And I do not let what came later contaminate it, because if I let what came later contaminate it, then I have to admit I lost my son twice, and a mother can only bury so much. For the first 6 years after Raymond died, I kept the workshop exactly as he left it. The apron on the hook. The half-finished bookshelf clamped to the bench. The radio still set to the AM station that played big band music on Sundays. I went out there every morning with my coffee. I swept the floor once a week. I oiled the lathe. I changed the bulb when it burned out. The neighbors knew. Martin from across the street, who Raymond had made a rocking chair for when his granddaughter was born, used to wave from his driveway and say, "Morning. Georgia, give Ray my best." He said it like Raymond was still in there. I think for Martin he was. I think for me, he was too. I lived on Raymond's pension and the savings we'd built in 34 years of careful living. I'd retired from the library 2 years before Raymond got sick. I'd been a school librarian at Belmont Elementary for 30 years, and I still volunteered in the children's reading program on Saturdays. Phyllis, my friend Phyllis with the 2 cedar chests, ran the program with me. We read picture books to 4-year-olds and their tired parents, and afterward we drank bad coffee out of paper cups. And that was my life. It was small. It was enough. I had a paid-off house, a workshop full of my husband's ghost, a pencil in my purse, and 1 Saturday a week with children who still believed in dragons. Derek started borrowing money in the 7th year, $500 in March for a transmission repair, $800 in June for the girls' dental work. My granddaughters, Emma and Sophie, were 8 and 5 then, and I would have given Derek my last dollar for their teeth. And he knew that. $1,000 in October for a furnace replacement. He always said he'd pay it back next paycheck. He never did. I tracked every loan in Raymond's old ledger, the green one Raymond used for the workshop accounts, because old habits are how a librarian stays sane. By the end of 3 years, the total was $19,200. Not once did he repay a single dollar. Not once did he mention the ledger. When I brought it up gently at Christmas dinner, just brought it up, said Derek, "Honey, when you have a chance." Vanessa, his wife, looked at me across the table and said, "Georgia, are you really going to bring up money on Christmas?" The girls went quiet. Derek changed the subject. I did not bring it up again. I should tell you about Vanessa. She is 41 years old, a real estate agent, very good at her job in the technical sense, and she has a particular way of smiling that is not actually smiling. It is the arrangement of the face into a smile shape. Raymond met her twice before he died, and afterward, alone with me in the kitchen, he said, "Georgia, that woman keeps a calculator where most people keep a soul." He said it without cruelty. He said it the way he might have said a board was warped. Just an observation. I told him to be nice. He said he was being nice. He was right. He usually was. In January of last year, I came down with a flu that turned into pneumonia inside of a week. I was 60 years old, alone in the bungalow, and Phyllis took me to the urgent care, and the urgent care sent me to the ER, and the ER sent me home with 3 prescriptions and an instruction to keep the house warm and stay hydrated. Derek showed up that night. He stood in my kitchen and said, "Mom, you can't be here alone. You're coming to stay with us until you're better. Vanessa wants you to come. The girls want to see you." He hugged me at the door of my own house, a tight, long hug, and I remember being grateful, so grateful, And now when I think about that hug, I understand it differently. That hug was a perimeter check. He was measuring whether I'd resist. I went with him. I packed a small suitcase. I brought the carpenter's pencil in my purse because I always do. I locked the bungalow and gave him the spare key because he asked for it, in case anything came up. He drove me to his house on Stillwater Drive, 15 minutes away, and showed me to the guest room. A small room over the garage, one window, a twin bed, a space heater plugged into the wall. He said, "Mom, the central heat upstairs runs us a fortune, so I bought you this little guy. Should keep you toasty. Vanessa says hi. She'll be up in a bit." Vanessa did not come up in a bit. Vanessa came up the next morning, knocked once, opened the door, and said, "Breakfast is in the kitchen if you can make it down the stairs." She said it like she was reading a meter. The girls, my Emma and Sophie, who used to climb into my lap and ask me to read them stories about princesses who fixed their own carriages. The girls came to the door of the guest room and stood there and waved at me from 6 feet away because, Vanessa said, they didn't want to catch what I had. That was fair. That was reasonable. But the way she said it, the careful distance. I lay in that twin bed for the first 3 days running a fever of 102, and the space heater clicked on and clicked off, and the room never got above 60 degrees because the space heater was small, and the room was over an uninsulated garage, and Derek would come up once a day to ask how I was, and put his hand on my forehead and say, "You're getting better, Mom. I can tell." On the 11th day, I was strong enough to walk down to the kitchen for dinner. Vanessa had made pot roast. The girls were doing homework at the counter. Derek was on his phone. I sat down. I ate slowly. And Vanessa, without looking up from her plate, said, "Georgia, Derek is handling the workshop property so you can stop worrying about it. Honestly, you should stop being so sentimental about a pile of old wood. It's just taking up space." The girls giggled. Sophie, my baby Sophie, said Grandpa's junk shed. She said it the way a child says something she has heard adults say. She said it looking at her mother for approval. Vanessa smiled the smile shape at her daughter and said, "That's right, honey. Grandpa's junk shed." Derek did not look up from his phone. I want you to understand something. I did not cry at that table. I did not say anything at that table. I finished my pot roast. I said the food was lovely. I went back upstairs to the cold guest room, and I sat on the edge of the twin bed, and I took the carpenter's pencil out of my purse, and I held it in my palm, and I thought about Raymond's hands. Raymond's hands which built the cradle with the moons on it for the granddaughter who now called his life's work a junk shed. I did not cry. I was too tired to cry. I was 60 years old, recovering from pneumonia in a cold room, and I understood for the first time that something was very wrong, but I did not yet know how wrong. 2 days later, I called the gas company to ask why my own bungalow's heating bill, on autopay from my checking account for 11 years, had suddenly generated a past due notice forwarded to Derek's address. The woman on the phone said, "Ma'am, your autopay was canceled in November and a new autopay was set up from a different account in December, but that account had insufficient funds in January, so your service is 2 months in arrears, and frankly, you're lucky your pipes haven't frozen." I sat on the edge of the twin bed. I asked her what account the new autopay was set up from. She said, "I can't give you the full number, but the last 4 digits are 4471. Derek's checking account ended in 4471. I knew because I had written him checks for the girls' birthdays. I went downstairs. Derek was home, in the kitchen, eating cereal at the counter. I said, "Derek, did you change my heating autopay?" He chewed. He swallowed. He said, "Mom, you don't need that big house anymore anyway. We're going to talk about it when you're better." And he went back to his cereal. That is the sentence I want you to hold. "Mom, you don't need that big house anymore anyway." He said it the way you would say pass the salt. He said it while my pipes were freezing in the house Raymond and I had paid off with 34 years of carefulness. He said it without looking at me. And I understood, standing in his kitchen in my robe, that I had walked into something I had not seen coming. And I understood that I was alone in his house, 15 minutes from my own home, with no car keys in my purse because Derek had driven me here, and I needed to think. I went back upstairs. I did not say anything. I did not yell. I lay down on the twin bed and I closed my eyes, and I let my mind do what my mind has always done when something is wrong. I let it become a library. I started shelving the evidence. The hug at the front door that was a perimeter check. The space heater that didn't heat. Vanessa saying Derek is handling the workshop property. The girls saying junk shed. The auto pay redirected to his account. The $19,200 in the green ledger. And then, in the same library, I remembered something else. I remembered a sealed envelope. I remembered Raymond in the hospice on one of those 31 nights, lifting his head off the pillow and saying, "Georgia, if anything ever goes sideways, you go see Howard Pratt. Don't call him. Go in person. And don't bring Derek." I remember asking what he meant. He said, "Just promise me." I promised him. I had not thought about it in 9 years. 9 years. The next morning, Derek went to work. Vanessa took the girls to school. The house was empty. I got up, slowly, and walked through it the way a librarian walks through stacks. Not searching exactly, but paying attention. I ended up in the small home office Derek kept in the back of the house. The filing cabinet was unlocked. The top drawer was full of insurance paperwork from his job. The second drawer was personal. I am not, by nature, a snoop. I had never opened my son's filing cabinet in my life. But on that morning, in his cold house, I opened the second drawer. It was on top. A manila folder, labeled in Derek's handwriting, Linwood, the street where I lived. Inside the folder was a printout from Zillow showing my bungalow listed as coming soon, dated 6 weeks earlier. Photographs taken from my own front yard, which meant someone had been on my property without telling me. Behind that was a copy of a power of attorney document I had signed 5 years ago when I'd had a minor surgery for medical decisions only, with Derek as the agent. I remembered signing it. I had not remembered that the document, the way Derek's lawyer drafted it, was not limited to medical decisions. It was a general power of attorney. I had signed away more than I knew. Behind the POA was a certified letter from the Montgomery County Assessor's Office, addressed to me, opened, with the envelope slit cleanly along the top. The letter was dated 6 months ago. It informed me, the owner of the workshop parcel at the rear of 442 Linwood Avenue, that the zoning had been changed from residential accessory to mixed-use commercial, increasing the assessed value of the parcel to $285,000. The letter had been mailed to my address. Derek had intercepted it. Derek had opened my mail. And behind that letter was a property transfer document, filed at the Montgomery County Recorder, dated 3 weeks ago, transferring the workshop parcel from Georgia Manning to Stillwater Commercial Holdings, LLC, for the sum of $285,000. The signature on the line that said Georgia Manning was not my signature. It was Derek's attempt at my signature. He'd gotten the G mostly right. My hands went cold before I finished reading. My body understood before my mind did. I sat down in Derek's office chair. I held the carpenter's pencil in my hand. I looked at the forged signature and the date of the sale, and I did the arithmetic. 3 weeks ago, I had been in this house, in the twin bed over the garage, with a fever, breathing into a dollar store humidifier, while my son drove to the county recorder and forged my name on a document that sold the place Raymond used to stand. The place that still smelled like him. I had been the alibi for my own robbery. I closed the folder. I put it back in the drawer exactly the way I'd found it. I went upstairs. I packed my suitcase. I took a long, slow breath, and then I sat on the twin bed, and I waited until the afternoon, when Vanessa came home with the girls, and I came downstairs and said, "Vanessa, I'm feeling much better. I think I'd like to go home now, just for a few days, just to check on the house." Vanessa looked at me with the smile shape and said, "Oh, Georgia, are you sure? Derek will worry." I said, "I'll be fine." She drove me home. She talked the whole way about her listings. She walked me to the door of my own bungalow, and she said, "Call us if you need anything, Georgia." And she got in her car and drove away. And I unlocked my own front door for the first time in 6 weeks. And the house was cold, 48 degrees inside, and the air smelled like a place no one had loved in a long time. I called Phyllis. I told her I needed her. She came over inside of 20 minutes with a casserole and a bottle of bourbon. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I was done, she said, "Georgia, you need a lawyer, and not Derek's lawyer." I said, "I know who I need. I need Howard Pratt." Raymond told me, 9 years ago, to go see Howard Pratt if anything ever went sideways. Phyllis said, "Then we're going to see Howard Pratt tomorrow morning. If you are listening to this, and you have ever sat in a cold house holding evidence of your own betrayal and felt the particular silence of understanding that the person you raised was the person who did it, please take a breath right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. There are people out there listening who needed to hear what I'm telling you, and your subscription helps them find this story. Now let me tell you about Howard Pratt. Howard Pratt's office was on the second floor of a brick building on Wayne Avenue above a dry cleaner. The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled like old carpet. Howard was 74 years old, still working 3 days a week, still wearing the same kind of brown suit Raymond used to call his lawyer suit because Howard had always worn one. He looked up when Phyllis and I walked in, and he said, "Georgia." He said it like a man who had been waiting 9 years to say it. He said, "Sit down." I sat down. He said, "Raymond left something with me." He said, "I have been hoping you would come, and dreading it too, because the fact of you coming would mean something went wrong." He said, "Is something wrong?" I told him. I told him the whole thing. The workshop, the POA, the forged signature, the redirected autopay, the Zillow listing, the junk shed, the pneumonia, the space heater. Howard listened with his hands folded. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Georgia, are you sure you want to open this? Are you sure you want what's inside it?" He hesitated. I want you to know that he hesitated. He said sometimes old wounds heal closed for a reason. I said, "Howard, my wound is not closed. My wound was just torn open by my own son. Show me what Raymond left." He went into a back room. He came back with a sealed manila envelope, yellow with age, with Raymond's handwriting on the front. It said, "For Georgia. Only Georgia. Hand deliver." Howard set it on the desk between us. He said Raymond came to me in November of 1997, 3 months before he was diagnosed. And let me stop you, because I see your face. Yes, Raymond did this 28 years ago, long before the cancer, long before any of this. Raymond came to me in 1997 because he had watched his own father get cleaned out by a brother, and he said, "Howard, I want to make sure that if anything ever happens to me, Georgia is protected from people who love her the wrong way." Those were his words. Howard slid the envelope toward me. He said, "Open it when you're ready. I'm going to step out for a coffee. Take as long as you need." He left. Phyllis held my hand. I opened the envelope. Inside the envelope was a stack of documents. The top one was a life insurance policy. Whole life. issued by a company called Midwestern Mutual in October of 1997, with Raymond as the insured and me as the irrevocable beneficiary. Irrevocable, meaning no one could change it, not Raymond himself, not Derek, no one, in the amount of $410,000. Beneath the policy was a credit union account statement from a credit union 40 miles away in Springfield, Ohio. An account opened in 1997 in my name, funded by Raymond over the years with small monthly deposits, and now holding, with interest and the policy proceeds that had been routed there by automatic instruction at the time of his death, $410,000 and some change. The credit union had been holding this account, quietly accruing interest for 9 years, waiting for me to walk in and claim it. Raymond had instructed Howard, in writing, not to release any of it to me unless I contacted him independently, not through Derek, not through any family member. Just me, walking in on my own feet. Beneath the credit union statement, stapled to the back of the policy, was a folded piece of yellow legal paper. Raymond's handwriting, the careful draftsman's print he used for measurements and lists. I unfolded it. Georgia, it said, if you're reading this, someone failed you. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer to stop it. I stopped. I had to stop. Phyllis put her arm around my shoulders. I read the next line. I want you to know I thought about this for a long time before I did it. I am not a suspicious man. But I watched my father get torn apart by his own brother, and I watched my mother apologize for being a burden until the day she died, and I made myself a promise. Not on my watch. Not to you. I had to stop again. Phyllis handed me a tissue. I read on. This money is yours. Not Derek's. Not anyone's. Yours. If Derek is reading over your shoulder, Derek, I love you. But go in the other room. This is between your mother and me. I laughed. I laughed and cried at the same time. Phyllis laughed too. Raymond was making a joke from 9 years dead. Raymond was making a joke. Build something that makes you smile. A garden, a cottage, a trip. Whatever it is. Don't save it for anyone. Don't lend it to anyone. Spend it on a life that has you in the middle of it. You were always in the middle of mine. Tell Phyllis hello for me. Tell Martin I said the rocking chair holds up fine. I checked. I have to stop writing this because I am crying at my own kitchen table like a fool. I loved every minute. Every single one. Even the bad ones. Especially the bad ones. You held my hand through everything, Georgia. Let this hold yours. Ray. There was a postscript in smaller writing at the bottom of the page. P.S. In the workshop apron there is a pencil. Take it. It built the cradle. It can build whatever comes next. R. I sat in Howard Pratt's office above the dry cleaner on Wayne Avenue, holding a letter my husband wrote at our kitchen table 3 months before he was diagnosed with the cancer that would kill him, and I cried in a way I had not cried at his funeral, had not cried in the hospice chair, had not cried when I came home to an empty bungalow 9 years ago. I cried because Raymond had known. Not specifically. Not Derek's name. Not the workshop. But the shape of it. He had known the shape of it. He had seen in 1997, when our son was a 10-year-old boy who liked to sand wood with his father, that someday someone might fail me, and he had reached forward across his own death and put a hand under me. The pencil in my purse, he had told me to take it. He had told me, in the letter, what I had already done. I read the letter again. I read it a third time. I read the line that said, you were always in the middle of mine. I read the line that said, let this hold yours. I read the joke about Derek going in the other room. I read the part about Martin's rocking chair. I read the postscript about the pencil. The pencil was in my purse. I took it out. I laid it on top of the letter. I sat in that small brown office above the dry cleaner, and I held a pencil and a piece of paper, and the entire weight of being loved more carefully than I had understood for 34 years. Howard came back with coffee. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Georgia, what do you want to do?" I want you to understand what I did not do. I did not call the police. I did not call Derek. I did not call a divorce attorney for myself, which Phyllis suggested gently, and I shook my head. I did not file a civil suit for the forged POA, which Howard said I had a clear case for. I did not go to the newspaper, though Phyllis pointed out the Dayton Daily News would eat the story alive. I did not, in any way, pursue Derek. I did one thing, and then I did another thing, and then I did a third thing, and that was all. I sat in Howard's office for a long minute before I answered him. I looked at the brown of his suit, and the brown of the wood paneling on his walls, and the brown of the coffee in the paper cup he had set in front of me. And I thought how much of my life had been the color of wood, the color of something Raymond would have known the name of. Walnut, he would have said, or cherry, when the light was right. I held the carpenter's pencil between two fingers and I rolled it slowly against my thumb, the way I had seen Raymond do it 10,000 times when he was thinking about a cut. I said, "Howard, I am going to do the smallest possible thing in the cleanest possible way, and I am going to do it without anyone's permission but my own." He nodded. He did not ask what I meant. He waited. I had rehearsed this silence for years without knowing I was rehearsing it. The first thing was that I transferred my pension deposits, my Social Security, and my entire banking relationship to the credit union in Springfield. Howard drove me there himself the following Monday. He drove a beige sedan that smelled faintly of pipe tobacco and peppermint, and he did not turn on the radio, and the silence between us was the kind of silence two people who knew Raymond could share without effort. 40 miles of cornfield and gray February sky, and a single hawk on a fence post about halfway there. The credit union manager, a woman named Diane with kind eyes, walked me into a private office and read the trust document aloud to me, the document Raymond had signed in 1997. And when she got to the end, she set the paper down and she said, "Mrs. Manning, your husband loved you." I said yes. He did. She said, "The account is yours, free and clear, and we have been a good steward of it." I said thank you. I signed where she told me to sign. I used Raymond's carpenter's pencil. The wedge tip left a soft, fat line on the signature card, not the thin line of a banker's pen, and Diane looked at it, and then she looked at me, and she did not say a word about the pencil. She just smiled. She put the signature card in a folder. She slid a small green deposit booklet across the desk to me. The booklet had a gold seal on the front, and my name in raised letters on the inside cover. Georgia Manning. Not Georgia and Raymond. Not Georgia and Derek. Just Georgia. I had not seen my name alone on a piece of bank paper in 40 years. The second thing was that I went home, packed my things from Derek's guest room while he was at work. I had gone back briefly to retrieve the rest of my belongings, and I left him a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Derek, I'm going home. Thank you for taking care of me. Love, Mom." I did not mention the workshop. I did not mention the POA. I did not mention the forged signature or the auto pay or the Zillow listing or the $410,000. I just signed it, "Love, Mom," because I did love him, in the way you love a person who used to be someone else. I left the note on the counter and I walked out of his house and I did not look back, because Raymond had once told me, when we left a job where I'd been treated badly, that looking back was for people who weren't sure they wanted to leave. I locked his front door behind me. I put the spare key he had given me, the one to his house, under the doormat, because returning it directly felt like a conversation I did not owe him. I walked 4 blocks to the corner where Phyllis had told me she would be parked. The wind was up. The maple seed pods from the previous autumn skittered along the sidewalk in little brown helicopters. Phyllis saw me coming, and she got out of her car and she opened the passenger door without saying anything, and I climbed in, and she handed me a thermos of tea, and she said home. I said home. The third thing was that I rented a cottage. A small one on Brown Street. 2 bedrooms and a porch, and a fenced backyard with a maple tree. A 10-minute walk from the public library where I had volunteered for 30 years. I used some of Raymond's money to pay the deposit. I bought a new kettle. I bought a reading chair, a deep blue one, with arms wide enough to balance a teacup, picked out from a furniture store on Far Hills Avenue where the salesman left me alone for an hour to sit in 3 different chairs until I found the one that felt like the inside of a hug. I had Phyllis come help me carry boxes. I hung Raymond's framed photograph, the one of him at his lathe, wearing his apron, looking up at the camera with sawdust in his eyebrows, on the wall above the reading chair, and I put the carpenter's pencil in a small ceramic cup on the windowsill beside the photograph, and I changed my emergency contact at my doctor's office and the library and the credit union from Derek Manning to Phyllis Coughlin. That was the third thing. The county, in the meantime, was doing its own work without any prompting from me. The recorder's office has a 90-day challenge window on property transfers, and a clerk named Brenda, who had known Raymond because he'd built her mother a sewing cabinet in 2003, had been suspicious of the signature on the workshop transfer document the day it was filed. She had flagged it for internal review. She had written, in pencil, on a yellow sticky note attached to the file, "Signature does not match prior recorded specimens. Request hold." She told me this later, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee out of a mug Raymond had bought at a craft fair in 2002. She said, "Georgia." The moment I saw that G, I knew. She said, "I have seen your real signature on 3 deed filings going back to 1986. I know your G. That G on the transfer was not your G." When my move to the Springfield Credit Union triggered an address change in the county tax records, Brenda noticed, and Brenda made a phone call to Howard Pratt, because Howard had been Raymond's attorney and Howard's name was still on file, and Howard told Brenda, quietly, that there was reason to take a closer look at the transfer. The county put a hold on the sale pending forensic review of the signature. The developer who had bought the property could not break ground. A bulldozer that had been delivered to the lot sat there for 11 days under a blue tarp before they sent a truck to take it back. The $285,000 sat in a joint account at a bank in Derek's name and mine, opened, I would later learn, without my knowledge, using the same forged signature, and was now frozen by court order. But of that $285,000, only $65,000 was still in the account. Derek had withdrawn $220,000 in the first 9 days. He had paid off $74,000 in credit card debt I had not known he had. He had bought a boat, a 28-foot Sea Ray, with a slip on a lake in northern Ohio, for $91,000. He had paid off Vanessa's car and bought her a diamond bracelet for $15,000. He had spent the rest on, in Vanessa's later words, lifestyle improvements. A new television larger than the wall it hung on, a set of golf clubs, a weekend at a resort in French Lick, Indiana. Vanessa had not known any of this until the boat showed up in a photograph on his business partner's phone at a barbecue. She had asked. He had lied. She had asked again. He had lied again. She had called her brother, who was a forensic accountant, and her brother had spent a Saturday looking at Derek's credit card statements, and on a Sunday morning, Vanessa had served Derek with divorce papers across the breakfast table. The girls were upstairs. The eggs were still on his plate. He told Phyllis later, in one of his attempts to reach me, that the eggs went cold while he read the papers, and that the cold of the eggs was somehow the part he remembered most. I did not know what to do with that detail when Phyllis told me. I still don't. Derek's insurance company audited his personal finances as part of a routine compliance check. Insurance adjusters are required to disclose large unexplained deposits, and the $220,000 set off a flag in their system. They opened an internal investigation. He was placed on administrative leave. Two of the neighbors who had been at the notarization, Derek had used a mobile notary, and the notary had signed off on a signature that did not match mine because the notary did not have a sample of my signature, and the two neighbors had been the required witnesses. Refused to provide character references when Derek's lawyer contacted them. One of them was Martin. Martin called me the day Derek's lawyer called him. Martin said, "Georgia, I'm so sorry. I tried to call you. He said Derek told me you'd approved it. He said I should have known better. He said I should have driven over and asked you in person." I said, "Martin, it's all right." He said it's not all right. He said, "I have a rocking chair in my living room that your husband made, and I let his son do this." I said, "Martin, you didn't let him do anything. He did it." I said, "Come over for coffee on Saturday." He came over for coffee on Saturday. He brought me a coffee cake from the bakery on Salem Avenue, the one Raymond used to stop at on Friday mornings, and he set it on my kitchen table and his hands were shaking. We sat on the porch. The maple in the backyard had not leafed out yet, and the branches made a clean black pattern against the gray sky. He cried, a little. He cried into a handkerchief he pulled out of his back pocket, a real cloth handkerchief, the kind men of Raymond's generation still carried. I let him. I did not try to make him feel better. I did not say it was fine. I let the silence sit on the table between us, and after a while he folded the handkerchief and put it back in his pocket, and he said, "The coffee cake is from the Salem place." I said, "I know." I said Raymond used to bring me one every Friday. He said, "I know." We ate 2 pieces each. We did not talk about Derek again. The neighborhood. I should tell you about the neighborhood. Martin posted in the local Facebook group, 2 days after the divorce papers were served, a single sentence. He said Derek Patterson. That was Derek's wife's name, but it was what people in the neighborhood now called him because Vanessa had taken back her maiden name immediately. Derek Patterson sold his dead father's workshop out from under his own mother. 23 people commented. Some of them had known Raymond. The Hendersons, whose dining table Raymond built after their fire, commented that Raymond had been the kindest man on the block. Mrs. Latham from the corner house, whose husband had borrowed Raymond's drill press once a month for 15 years, commented that she had a kitchen cabinet Raymond had fixed for free in 1994, and that the hinge he installed still worked better than any hinge in her house. Phyllis commented underneath a heart emoji that said, "Georgia is fine. She is loved. Please send your prayers to her, not your pity." The post got shared 147 times within the city limits. I do not have Facebook. Phyllis showed me on her phone. I read the comments once and I did not read them again, because I did not need to. The point was not the comments. The point was that the truth had legs of its own. I did not have to push it. It walked. Derek called me. He called me 14 times in 1 week. The first call, I did not pick up because I was at the library. The second call, I did not pick up because I was making dinner. By the 4th call, my voicemail box was full because I had not deleted Phyllis's old messages from the reading program, and I made a small decision then, a quiet one. I decided not to empty it. I let the voicemail box stay full. Every call he made after that went to a message that said this mailbox is full and cannot accept new messages. The phone simply did not let him in. He did not have my new address. Howard had filed a change of contact information through Phyllis. The county records updated to a P.O. box. Derek had no way to reach me except by physically driving to my bungalow, which was empty and locked, and waiting. He did wait. Phyllis told me he sat in his car on Linwood Avenue for 3 hours one Saturday afternoon. He sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and the windows fogging from his breath. And the Andersons' boy who delivers papers told Phyllis he saw him crying. He left. He did not come back. I want to tell you about the day I went back to the bungalow to clean out the workshop. The county had ruled by then that the property transfer was invalid due to a forged signature, and the title was being restored to me. The developer was suing Derek for the return of the $220,000 he had spent. The bungalow itself had been on hold because of the POA review, and that hold was being lifted. I could sell the bungalow if I wanted to. I could keep it. I could rent it. Howard advised me to take my time. I took my time. But the workshop needed to be visited. I drove there alone on a Wednesday morning in April with the carpenter's pencil in my purse. The day was cool and bright. The forsythia along the back fence was just beginning to break open in those small yellow bursts that always made Raymond say spring was a yellow thing before it was a green thing. I parked in the gravel drive. I sat in the car for a long minute before I got out. I unlocked the side door. The hinge made the same small dry creak it had always made. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, cedar and oil and old paper and the faint sweet trace of pine resin that lived in the rafters and never left no matter how many winters passed. The radio was still set to the big band station, though it was unplugged. The half-finished bookshelf was still clamped to the bench, the clamps rust-spotted now, the wood beneath them slightly darker where the moisture had been held. The apron was on the hook. The lathe was clean. I had oiled it 3 days before the pneumonia. Raymond's handwriting was on a piece of masking tape stuck to a coffee can full of brass screws, and the masking tape said brass, short. There was a coil of orange extension cord hung on a 16-penny nail beside the door, exactly where he had hung it the night he last walked out, and the nail itself he had driven at a slight upward angle so the cord would never slip off. And I stood there looking at the angle of that nail, and I thought about how a man's mind shows up in the angle of a nail 40 years after he drives it. I stood in that workshop and I cried. But I did not cry the way I had cried in Howard's office. I cried like someone who had come home. I sat down on Raymond's stool. The seat was worn shiny in the exact shape of his sitting. I took the pencil out of my purse and I held it. I said, "Ray, I'm here." I said, "Ray, you saved me." I said, "Ray, I don't know what to do with what you left me." A house finch landed on the windowsill outside, looked in through the dusty glass with one bright black eye, and flew off. The bulb over the lathe was off. The light in the room was the soft, slow morning light that came in through the small east-facing window and fell across the bench in a clean rectangle. The dust in the rectangle moved in small, slow currents. 43 seconds passed before I moved again. And then I had an idea. I called Phyllis. I said, "Phyllis, what if I turned the workshop into a children's reading space? What if I built shelves along these walls, Raymond's shelves, the ones he never finished, and put rocking chairs in here, and brought the Saturday reading program out to this lot every other week in the warm months, and let kids climb on Raymond's lathe with the belt off, and let them touch the wood?" Phyllis was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I could hear, faintly, her kitchen radio playing the same big band station Raymond had liked. Phyllis said Georgia. Phyllis said yes. Phyllis said Raymond would have loved that. Phyllis said, "Let's do it." I used some of the credit union money, 38,000 of it in the end when all the receipts were tallied. I hired a contractor, a young man named Eli who had apprenticed under Raymond 10 years ago, and who had cried at Raymond's funeral, and who said when I called him, "Mrs. Manning, I will do this for cost. I will not take a profit. Please let me do this." Eli finished the shelves. He used the same poplar Raymond had stacked in the rafters for the bookshelf he never got to finish, and the wood had cured to a pale honey color in 9 years of dry workshop air. And Eli said, "Mrs. Manning, this wood is sweeter now than it was the day he bought it." Eli built a small wooden stage in the corner, 3 steps up, with a railing the height of a 6-year-old's hand. He sanded the floor. We kept the apron on the hook. We kept the radio. We kept the can of brass screws labeled brass, short. We added a small brass plaque by the door that said Raymond's Workshop, a reading place, and underneath, In smaller letters, he built things for the neighborhood. The neighborhood is still using them. We opened in June. 11 children came to the first Saturday. The first book I read in that room was a picture book about a bear who lost his hat. And when I got to the end, where the bear finds his hat, a 4-year-old in the front row clapped both her hands once, sharply, like a tiny round of applause for the bear, and the other children laughed, and I had to set the book down for a second, because my throat had gone tight. By August, it was 26 children. By October, it was 40, and Phyllis had recruited 2 other retired librarians and a teenager from the high school who wanted volunteer hours, and the Saturday reading program had a new home, Raymond's home, and parents sat in the rocking chairs Raymond had built years ago, donated back by the families who had received them, and listened to their children be read to in the place where their furniture had been made. The Hendersons brought back the small side chair Raymond had thrown in with their dining table. Mrs. Latham brought back a step stool. Martin brought back the rocking chair from his living room on a Tuesday, in the bed of his pickup truck, and he set it down in the corner under the window, and he put his hand on the headrest and he said, "There, Ray, there you are." Derek learned about it. I don't know how. Probably through Martin or through Vanessa, who had moved across town and kept loose contact with the neighborhood. He called Phyllis. Phyllis did not pick up either. He wrote me a letter. I have it still. It came in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from a zip code I did not recognize, the handwriting smaller and more careful than I remembered his handwriting being. It said, "Mom, I know I cannot ask for forgiveness. I know what I did. I am in counseling. I have lost everything. I am living in a 1-bedroom apartment with my mattress on the floor. The girls visit me every other weekend. I am paying restitution to the developer at $300 a month, which I will be paying for the rest of my working life. Vanessa is dating a man I used to work with. I am not writing to ask for anything. I am writing to say I am sorry. I am writing to say I see you now, and I see what I did. And I see what Dad did to protect you from me, and I cannot live with what that means. But I am trying to. Love, Derek." I read the letter once. I put it in a drawer. The drawer in the small nightstand in my bedroom. The second one down, beneath a pair of reading glasses and a tin of throat lozenges. I did not write back. I will write back. Someday. Maybe. I have not decided. Phyllis said you don't owe him a response. Howard said you don't owe him a response. I know I don't owe him one. But I also know he is my son. And somewhere inside the man who forged my signature and bought a boat is the boy who slept in the cradle with the moons on it. I am 60 years old. I will figure it out when I figure it out. I am allowed to take my time. There is a statistic I read recently. About 1 in 10 older Americans experiences some form of financial exploitation, and the perpetrator is a family member in over 60% of those cases. 60%. I had to read that twice. I had to sit down. Because I had thought, when this happened to me, that I was the only one. I had thought I was a fool for not seeing it. I was not a fool. I was one of millions. The library has resources on this. The Adult Protective Services Office in Montgomery County has resources on this. If something about this story made the hair on your arm stand up, please, please, find those resources for yourself or for someone you love. It is now February again, a full year since the pneumonia. The cottage on Brown Street is warm. The reading chair faces the maple tree in the backyard. The carpenter's pencil sits in the ceramic cup on the windowsill, next to Raymond's photograph. The letter is in a small wooden box on my nightstand, and I take it out and read it perhaps once a week, perhaps more. The paper is soft at the folds now. I have read it so many times I know it by heart, but I read it on paper anyway, because Raymond's handwriting is its own voice. I miss Raymond every day. I miss him with an ache that is no longer sharp, but has not gone away, and never will. I miss the son Derek used to be. I miss the bungalow on Linwood Avenue, though I still own it. And I rent it now to a young family with a baby, and the baby sleeps in a room where my baby once slept. I miss many things, but the cottage is warm. The library is a 10-minute walk. Phyllis brings her granddaughter Maddie to the reading program every other Saturday, and Maddie calls me the story lady, and last week Maddie asked me if I had built the shelves. I said, "No, sweetheart, my husband built them." She said, "Where is your husband?" I said, "He died a long time ago." She said, "Is that why they have his name on the door?" I said, "Yes." She said, "That's a nice idea." She said, "When my grandma dies, I'm going to put her name on a door too." Phyllis laughed and cried at the same time, and so did I. If you have ever kept someone's memory alive while the people who should have helped you tried to sell it, if you have ever been called sentimental for protecting what was sacred, please hear me. You are not sentimental. You are faithful. And your faithfulness is not weakness. Tell me in the comments below, and I want you to actually do this, because I want to know, what is the one object you would never let anyone take from you? Mine is a flat yellow carpenter's pencil with sawdust in the grooves. Tell me yours. I will read every single answer. I used to think love was what the living gave you, and that when they stopped giving it, you were left empty. I was wrong. Love is what someone built into the structure of your life before they left, and the building is still standing whether they are or not. Trust and love are not the same thing. You can trust someone with your present and discover too late that they were never trustworthy. You cannot untrust someone with your past. What they already gave you stays given. That is the story. One pencil, one letter, soft at the folds. One workshop turned into a reading room. If any part of this hit close, please tell me in the comments which part. Was it the pencil? Was it the letter? Was it the moment in Howard's office? Was it the empty voicemail box? Like this video if it meant something to you. Subscribe if you want to hear the next one. Share it with someone who needs to hear that being faithful to a memory is not the same as being weak. I'm Georgia, the story lady. Tomorrow Phyllis is bringing Maddie back to meet a friend of hers, and I have a book about a dragon who builds furniture picked out, because I think Raymond would have liked that one. Until next time, take care of what